This is a MacBook, but it's running Linux. And you might be asking, why would you do such a thing? Well, you see, Apple just announced this poor laptop's funeral a few months ago, all because it's using old Intel chips instead of their new M chips. And if there's one thing I hate, it's when perfectly functioning laptops get tossed in the dump, doomed to become nothing but a pile of e-waste for no good reason. Slowly but surely, our devices won't run even the simplest apps just because they're deemed as too old by their own creators. Well, I don't believe in too old. No one's ever too old for anything, especially this 2019 MacBook Pro. Now, this MacBook has clearly exchanged hands more than a few times throughout its 7-year life. The charger has Gabe etched into it, Tom was logged in when I powered it on, and now it's come to me, Betty and the team. It's highly likely you or a family member you know might have one of these guys laying around too, just hanging out in the closet, forgotten and collecting dust. But it's time to blow that dust off. And I know just the thing to give these MacBooks a second life and save them from the landfill. Linux! It can literally bring back tech from the dead. Now, how do we get here to this crazy experiment of bringing Frankenstein back to life? It started with just trying to salvage this MacBook to begin with. I wanted an extra laptop for the office, and it seemed like an excellent candidate. It's thin, it's light, it's perfect for bringing to a library or a coffee shop to get some work done. It's also got a fingerprint reader and even the infamous touch bar of a bygone era. But in the big 2026, it's pretty clear it's on its last legs, so the team and I got into testing it. Straight away, we couldn't even install OBS, which needed Mac OS 12 or higher, and this MacBook was only on Mac OS 10, a foreboding omen of what's to come for this thing. So I installed Mac OS 26, which sounds like a huge upgrade. Until you look at this chart, I realized Apple, they don't know how to count. With the new OS update, the battery went from full charge to a measly 20% in just 4 hours. And that's with regular browsing, watching YouTube, and good old-fashioned work. Running OBS during all that spiked the GPU temps to a whopping 80 Celsius. They were about to have liftoff. We compared it to an old M2 MacBook Air laying around, and that lasted up to 10 hours doing the same thing without breaking a sweat. It never even hit 50 Celsius. Now, I've used Linux to revive other machines like my old Dell XPS or an old Lenovo ThinkPad. Linux made them run even better than they did with Windows. So it's time to see if Linux can work its magic here with my MacBook. Now, I imagine installing Linux on a Mac isn't as simple as flashing a drive, sticking it into the computer like I've been doing with all the other ones. It's a Mac, they're just built different. Thankfully, the internet doth come to my rescue. There is a whole website dedicated to helping you through this very challenge called t2linux.org. The T2 here standing for the security chip in the specific MacBooks. According to the website, you can install Linux on not just MacBooks, but also iMacs, Mac Minis, even a Mac Pro from this T2 era, which is super cool. Linux nerds can do anything. So I clicked on the Get Started button and started following through the guide. The first step was making a partition on the drive for Linux using Mac's disk utility tool. That was pretty easy. Then it was time to decide what distro to use. And if you know anything about Linux, you know there's hundreds out there to choose from. I've had Zorin on my framework for a few months, and I love how simple and easy it is to use. Even a grandma could figure it out. Now, in an ideal world, that would be the perfect choice. But as I kept reading the guide, I discovered that not all distros work the same on a MacBook. It has to know how to be buddies with the MacBook's bodyguard, basically the T2 chip. That means some distros, like Zorin, aren't gonna play as nicely as the ones on the list, like Arch or Mint, that have been set up to just work with a Mac better. So my options went from hundreds to about a handful, but there were still some pretty good ones to pick from. Now, I'm not trying to completely torture myself, so Arch is out of the picture. Shoving Linux on a MacBook is already a challenge, so it made sense to go with something real easy, like Linux Mint. It's like Zorin, it's simple, it's easy, and it just works. Now, I downloaded the specially brewed ISO for T2 machines from their GitHub, flashed it onto a drive using a dd command for disk writing. Then, following the step-by-step guide, I went into the recovery menu, turned off secure boot, and loaded into Mint's grub menu. Now, finally, it was time for the moment of truth. Would our Frankenstein creation live? Well, the Mint logo popped up on the screen, and it lingered there for a little while. Come come on, little guy. And after staring at my reflection on the screen long enough to start thinking about the greatest accomplishments of my life, I thought surely something had gone horribly wrong. Not with my life, but with the MacBook. And look, if you're the type of person that's even entertaining an idea like this one, I'm willing to bet good money you could get a lot out of today's sponsor, boot.dev. Look, I'm not saying that using Linux requires you to be a software development wizard or anything, but I would be lying if I said it isn't helpful. And look, I've tried a lot of ways to really learn any programming language over the years, but ultimately, at least for me, the only thing that's ever kept me engaged long enough is to gamify the whole thing, which is exactly what boot.dev does. Here's the thing though, there's plenty of websites out there trying to gamify coding, but there's a few key things boot.dev does I found really makes key differences. When you tackle a course on boot.dev, you're creating a real project that does a thing by the end of it all. It's crazy how much of a difference this makes. You're learning by building real, straightforward projects. The other very important thing boot.dev has going for it is its course offerings. Because look, maybe you're better than me. Maybe you see a course that's titled Learn Backend Python as it relates to SQL queries and you get excited. I, however, am far more interested in going on the journey of build a Pokédex in Go. And wouldn't you know it, by the end of the course, I had not only learned a lot about Go, but also picked up some pretty useful skills about APIs in general. Listen to these terms I'm using. I'm a changed woman. Now, if you're interested in learning how to tackle Linux like a boss and make your life 10 times easier, head to the link in the description and try it today. This might have been the end of the road. Apple must have deployed their Mac ninjas to sabotage my plans. And then it happened. I finally loaded into a live environment. Mission accomplished. But would it work like any other laptop? Or would I be left with something where half the features don't even work properly? There was one thing that seemed nearly impossible though, the touch bar. It's a weird proprietary Mac thing, and they don't even make them anymore. It wouldn't make sense for Mint to support it. Surely it'd be a case of dead on arrival. But there it was, lit up with a full row of buttons. There's no way the thing actually works, right? But I pressed the volume and brightness buttons and it did what it was supposed to on Linux. Now that I wasn't expecting at all. After getting my mind blown by the functioning touch bar, I went straight to connecting to Wi-Fi since you can't do much work or software installing or anything without the internet. And after entering my password 3 times, I got the hint it wasn't gonna work. That meant no YouTube, no software, no nothing. It's just a brick. And there's no way I'm hooking up Ethernet cable to a laptop. Stuff was getting good and now it's falling apart. But I've had worse things happen to me with Linux. I wasn't gonna let some silly internet connection stop me. I could just do some terminal magic, right? So I went back to consult the handy guide that said it should work after the installation. Hopefully that's true. So I placed my faith into the Linux nerds who wrote this guide and I carried on. If you've installed any OS before, you know there's the partitioning stage to give the OS however much space you want to give it on the drive. Some installers give you the option to erase everything and use the new OS like Mint does here. So just one click of a button and the Mac OS would be banished. There's only 128 gigs on this thing. That's peanuts in this day and age. I want my new Linux to have every gig it can get. But this isn't just any old computer. You gotta play it safe. According to the guide, Linux can operate on its own, but it still needs to talk to the Mac firmware to keep things like Wi-Fi and Bluetooth running smoothly. All thanks to that pesky T2 chip, no doubt. So to save myself from foreseeable headaches down the line, I kept macOS and Linux as unlikely roommates on the same drive. You live for now, Mac. Enjoy those 15 gigs while you can. I waited for the install to finish, restarted my laptop, and behold, the moment of truth. Linux on a MacBook. Look at it. I have the most customizable OS on the least customizable laptop. Historians will put this in the books. I'll be famous. And just like the guide said, my Wi-Fi does work now. There's no terminal magic, no forum searching required. But I'm still so baffled that the touch bar works. How is this possible? Apple is notorious for locking everything down behind their own code. And apparently, the touch bar compatibility with Linux didn't even exist until last year with the 6.17 update. And with this tiny DFR software that the guide mentions, I can even customize the buttons to have my own pictures on them. That's so cool. As I continued my testing, I was fully prepared for something to go wrong. It's Linux on a Mac. Surely, everything has to blow up eventually. And when it does, I'll be ready for it with the power of the internet and my terminal. But surprisingly, everything just worked. My webcam, my mic, I even connected my AirPods with Bluetooth without having to tinker with a single thing. At this point, I was almost looking for something to break. And I knew the thing that Linux hates: drivers, especially for docks. So I plugged in an Anchor dock I've been using, and of course, it didn't work straight away. You still have to install drivers manually. I've done this before. So I went to the website to grab a display link driver and get all the commands I needed, ran them in the terminal, pressed enter, and bam, it worked. And it was so easy, I almost couldn't believe it. Then after a few more minutes of playing with my unbelievably functioning Frankenstein laptop, I finally found a catch. You see, on Mac, the touch bar adapts to whatever app you have open, like a scrubber for videos, formatting tools for documents. But when I opened up YouTube, it just stayed the same row of buttons. I looked around to see if there was some hidden setting or software that Linux people out there made that could do this, but unfortunately, I came up with nothing, which sucks. But I gotta admit, I wasn't expecting this thing to work at all, so it's still a net positive, right? I went on installing my essential software like OBS and Discord, all without wrestling through pop-up warnings or permissions at every corner, and without something telling me my OS is too old. Now that is freedom. Overall, everything was working way better than I was expecting. And that's when I encountered the true boss of my journey, the fingerprint reader. When I opened the settings to set it up, Mint said it's not there. Remember that T2 chip that we keep talking about? What's playing its cards here? When this chip first launched with Apple products in 2017, it became notorious amongst refurbishers for making it a nightmare to replace anything in their MacBook. This chip keeps everything from the camera to the drive chained down to that very specific MacBook. iFixit even gives this thing a pitiful score of 2 out of 10. Even the MacBook Pro from 2025 got at least a 5 out of 10. But those newer MacBooks don't use that T2 chip anymore. Once Apple changed to their new silicon M chips, they didn't need a security chip anymore. Now all the encryption and the keys are ingrained onto the M chip. While Apple has made improvements to their repairability of their MacBooks since 2019, the M chip has proven to be a stonewall for Linux. All this to say is the fingerprint reader doesn't work, and unfortunately, it probably never will. But even if I'm annoyed at Apple keeping this laptop from its full potential, it wasn't hard to make Linux work. I've seen firsthand how fickle Linux can be on old regular computers, and this somehow turned to be better than those experienced. Given the whole website and the guide, I was ready to face all sorts of twists and turns along the way. But other than the fingerprint reader, everything here works. Look at my custom buttons. Apple doesn't let you do that. Now the next lucky person to use this laptop has nothing to fear from some pesky planned obsolescence. Consider this laptop saved by Linux. But as amazing as this is, there's still something that's gnawing at me. As I thought of giving this to a friend or a family member, this feeling kept growing louder and louder, and the more I thought, the more it nagged. Sure, I've successfully installed Linux on a MacBook, but also I've installed Linux on a MacBook. A college Mac user wouldn't want to use this. Linux would scare them off in like 5 seconds. A Linux user wouldn't want to use this. It's a Mac. Even I don't want to use this. I've just made a computer with a identity crisis. Linux can't save the battery life or the levels of heat from the GPU either. So not only does this Frankenstein laptop lack repairability, it also doesn't have the convenience of Apple's ecosystem that most users want from buying a Mac in the first place. So at the end of all this mad scientist experiment, the results are, it works. But who is this for? I don't know. As is always the case with Linux, if you really value control over your machine and you don't mind tinkering, try it. It could be a fun project to revive an old laptop. But if you wanted the convenience of a MacBook and Apple software, it looks like you and macOS are sticking it out until the bitter end. As for me, I'll just give this to the next person in the office and they can't say no. That'll be fun, huh?